very much for joining us, Gerry.
It's great to be here.
I hope I don't embarrass you by saying that I think you're one of Newfoundland's most accomplished filmmakers. Certainly celebrated, won a lot of awards. And I read one time you were describing why you like making film, and you didn't say that you like to make film. I mean, you didn't say you love to make film. You were quoted saying you loved to make film. So why did you set that aside to go into politics?
Well, I'm not so sure that I've set it aside. When I think of the art or the practice of filmmaking, when I was campaigning, going door to door, it was so exciting. It was sort of like doing a documentary film. You know, I knocked on doors. You never know what's going to be on the other side of a door that you knock on. People open their doors and they talk to me and they told me their stories. And I think as a documentary filmmaker, my role always was to listen, to try to listen with the intent to really hear what's going on, what's the story. And that's what happened on the campaign trail. Again, my role wasn't so much about convincing people to vote for me or to vote for the NDP. I felt that my role was, like a documentary filmmaker, to listen to people, to hear their stories, to hear their concerns, to hear some of their ideas, to hear some of their solutions. And then, like a film, gather that information together, try and gather all those films together, make sense of it, try and put it together so that those voices can be heard. And so in some ways it's not setting aside filmmaking, but I have to confess, I do miss the real collaborative nature of filmmaking. And I do miss the ways of listening, the ways of working with people, the ways of working together, and except within the caucus we have that. But again, I think that part of what I'm doing now is almost a natural extension, because the films that I was doing were films about giving people voice, and also they were films about changing the world. Not in a way that I'm arrogant enough to think that I, Gerry Rogers, can change the world, but that together we can work to try and make the world a better place for everyone. So I think it's about giving voice to people who don't usually have their voices heard. So it's kind of the same. And you know, and the same with the whole campaign and the election. I guess I got the audience award again this time.
I understand how your skill set and the way you work would lend itself to politics, and I can understand how it is an extension of the kind of filmmaking, the documentary filmmaking you made. But are there days that you wish you were making a film?
Oh God, yes. You know, oh God, yes. And I guess for me, you know, in the process of making a film, particularly when you're working with a team and a crew, and then afterwards in the editing room, it's about negotiation. It's about, I have an idea about this, I think we should do it this way. And then you have an editor who says, no, I think we should try this. And then you can afford to try. But it's a respectful environment where you have a common goal. You have a common goal, and then you bring, and then my role as a director was to try and make it possible for everybody to do the best that they could with their particular skills for this common goal of making the best film that we possibly could. I somehow expected that's what was going to happen in politics too. And it's not quite like that every day.
If what you wanted to do with film was to give people voice and maybe help change the world, where did that come from?
I grew up in a family, my mom was from a family of 13 people. 13 kids, and they were very poor. And when she was 14 years old, she was sent away to work as a maid and lost her education. She never had a strong formalized education. And my father grew up in a family where his father died when Dad was 11, and Dad was the youngest of 5 kids, and it was just him and his mom. And they had nothing. They lost the house that they were living in. And they lived from pillar to post. They took in laundry, they washed the floors at the West End Liquor Commission at night. And Dad stopped going to school when he was 13 because the Christian Brothers were so brutal and so violent, and he was afraid to go to school. And he stopped going to school for a few months before anybody contacted his mom to say, you know, where's Leo? He's not coming to school. And my mother had seen her family priest rape her girlfriend when Mom was 14, and he had arranged to have her sent away to work in service, where he had said to her family, oh, this is going to be good for Philomena, she'll get to go to school.
So it's okay to rape her, but not to have an abortion.
Yeah, but it'll be okay, she'll go, you know, this family will send her to school, but in fact, that's not what happened. So I grew up in a family that knew hardship. And both my parents, and then when Dad was 16, he said he was 17, and he was the first group of Newfoundland men to join the Canadian Army when Canada joined Newfoundland in 1949. And so we moved around a lot, but I came from a family that knew hardship, so I came from a family that also was very compassionate, that they knew that in order to survive, you had to help one another. And I guess moving around, you know, I was an Army brat, and we moved around all the time. And my parents were very involved in wherever we moved, that they were very involved in building community and helping out, starting food banks and those kinds of things. So I guess that's the culture that I come from, a culture that knows adversity, but that also has an incredible sense of hope and optimism. And it was a natural for me. But in terms of specifically film, I can remember I was working at the St. John's Status of Women Council here in St. John's when a film came out called Not a Love Story. And at the time I was working at the Women's Center, gee, this would have been 33 years ago. And I was involved in the women's movement. And the women's movement, there were a lot more of us in terms of activists who were looking at issues that you know, there's a lot has been done, a lot has changed, but we were looking at you know, the rights of women when they divorce, Matrimonial Property Act, childcare, which is one we still have to bang on the doors about. But at that time, it wasn't out there in the public agenda. We were pushing and pushing to have these issues recognized. Kathleen Shannon, who was executive producer of Studio D at the time, which was a feminist women's filmmaking studio at the National Film Board, came for a launch of this film on pornography called Not a Love Story. And I was so amazed at the power of film at that time. And it was at a time when the Film Board was taking films and showing them in church basements and community halls, and people would come. You know, there'd be hundreds of people would come, and you'd have this common experience of sitting in the dark, seeing a film, and then you'd talk about it afterwards. And I loved the kind of work I was doing with individual women, but damn it, it wasn't enough to try and help one individual woman. The system had to change. And then I saw that the films were such a powerful tool. And so I remember saying to Kathleen, you know, there's no films on battered women in North America. There isn't a film on child sexual abuse. And I said, these are the kinds of women that are coming to us for help. And I said, if we could do a film, if we could do films about these issues that say to women, you're not crazy, you're not alone, it's happening, the system has to change, you can heal and you can get better and we can work together. And so the next thing you know, she made me an offer I could neither understand nor refuse. And I headed off to Montreal for 10 years and I worked there, and that's...
So you were drawn into the Studio D orbit.
Yeah, I was. Yeah, I was. I was made a program producer right away, and boy, I tell you, that was a trial by fire because I didn't know how to make films. I knew how to tell stories. I knew what some of the issues were, and I knew how to work in a team, but I sure as hell didn't know how to make a film. And
So when you had the job interview, did you ask her, why me? Why are you offering me this?
yeah,
And what'd she say?
well, because of my experience within the community, and that she felt, because I always felt too that in the films that I was doing, I never wanted to make films about somebody. I wanted to make films with people. And in all the films that I have done, I've never used narration. I've always wanted the films to be intimate and I always felt that my role was to somehow clear a space for someone's story to be told, for someone's voice to be told. And so that was my approach. And that was my approach to political, or to, activist organizing and that. How do we make it possible to hear the voices, through all that clamor out there, to hear voices that we don't normally hear?
Just to understand, so your parents were raised in St. John's, in the shadow of the Basilica, I presume. But did you have like the Holy Heart education experience, or were you the Army brat moving around and avoided that? Or?
Well, my mom actually is from the Northern Peninsula, the great Northern Peninsula, she was always so very proud to say. And Dad was raised in St. John's. But we moved all over the place. I was born in Corner Brook, but then we moved to Montreal and Toronto, and I always went to Catholic schools. So I had a Catholic education, similar to a Holy Heart education.
But it wasn't the same kind of, if I can use the expression, oppressive Catholic atmosphere that you would have been part of had you stayed in St. John?
Well, I had grade 9, 10, 11, and 12 in Winnipeg, and at that time, that would have been 69, 70, 71, 72, and it was at a time, I like to call it, with deep respect, the time of the nuns a-go-go. And there were nuns in the inner city of Winnipeg doing incredible social action work. They were into liberation theology. They were very committed to social justice. They were working with Aboriginal communities in the inner core of Winnipeg. And that was a little bit different. And they were, in many ways, my heroes. Because for me, the women that I knew growing up, the adult women, were women like my mom, for the most part, who didn't have much of a formalized education, although many of them were brilliant, capable women. And they worked as grocery clerks or stay-at-home moms. And the only other women I did know were nuns who would have been more traditional, or nuns who were doing such incredible social action work. And I think that made quite an impact on me.
I think it's interesting, Jerry. I'm sorry to interrupt you, but if your experience with activist nuns as a young person, you find yourself now in a new Democratic caucus that's led by a woman who was one of those activist nuns.
Yeah, it's kind of interesting. And she was one of those activist nuns, not someone that I knew at the time, because I was in Winnipeg and Lorraine Michael was here. But she did an incredible amount of work as a nun, and then since she has left religious life as well. Yep.
People on the mainland may be kind of familiar with St. John's and Catholicism, but just so people understand, the downtown St. John's literally lived in the shadow of the cross, and the church dominated public life. I sometimes think one of the most important things that's happened in my time living in Newfoundland, like over 40 years now, was when the sexual abuse scandal involving the priest finally surfaced, and Mount Cashel finally surfaced, and an end of denominational education came, and it was almost like Newfoundland's quiet revolution, but it wasn't quite as quiet as it was in Quebec. You shake your head, yes?
Well, absolutely. And when some of those major changes happened, although there was a number of years of work by activists to push the government, because I think always that the public is far ahead of the government and legislative change anyways. It takes politicians so long to catch up to really what is happening. But Tobin was premier then. And I thought, within a short period of time, while he was premier, we abolished the denominational education system. There was funding for the abortion clinic. And what was the other one? Oh, and the Human Rights Act was changed to include protection for gays and lesbians. So gays and lesbians, sexual orientation was included in the Human Rights Act. And I kept thinking, wow, you know, this guy's doing this. It's as if he's not going to run again. You know, he took a lot of the very daring steps.
Not to take anything away from him, but I think a lot of it had to do with his wife.
Sure.
Who's a nurse.
That's right. And Jodine, a smart woman, who also had her finger on the pulse of what was happening in the community. And I think I met Jodine a few times, and she was somebody too who would listen with the intent of hearing. And you know, the writing was on the wall in many ways in terms of what was happening in other parts of the country, but also what was happening within the broader community, within the province. We were all pushing and saying, it's time, it's now. You know, do the right thing. It was a time of do the right thing now.
One of the right things that Brian Tobin did was to finance the rooms during a time when you could have cut and run on that, and it made a big difference in terms of the cultural industries. And we're sitting in the gallery at Devon House, which is the Craft Council place, which is one of the most important cultural industries. So, I mean, the kind of repercussions of it have reverberated in a nice way, I think.
Yeah, and you know, and also in the past few years, we've seen some increase in funding to the arts, but then it stopped. It stagnated again in terms of, you know, the increase at the time was great because the funding to the arts almost doubled. But it's time to catch up again. We are falling below in terms of the amount of money per capita that is spent on the arts. And it's kind of interesting because when you look at the huge tourism ads, which are great in some ways, but the arts are so celebrated, both on a municipal level and on a provincial level, and yet the funding that is dedicated to people in the arts is so minimal. And we have so many people in the arts who are living way below the poverty line. We know some of our stars who can't pay their light bill, their heat and light bill. There's something wrong with that, particularly when we see that art, which is an expression of our culture, is a sign of a healthy society. If we are celebrating, if we are supporting our cultural works, that is a sign, I think, of a healthy society. Then it's kind of interesting when we see what happens with government funding, that sometimes government funding is we see more of it moving towards, well, you have to prove that you can be an industry. You have to prove that it can be financially viable. Well, that's not often what art is. Particularly art that will take us to places that we may not be able to go on ourselves. Art that has an edge, that is progressive, that is innovative. We as a society have to be able to fund that kind of work. We cannot just fund so that Newfoundlanders and Labradorians are putting on their rubber boots and dancing for tourism. That's not what our art is about.
Yeah, there is a downside to turning culture into a product.
Yeah.
And the downside, I think, is reinforcing the negative stereotypes of the rubber boots and the goofy newfie, the stupid newfie stereotype.
Yeah. And it's wonderful to see the cultural community pushing against that. And I think that we may be moving into another era of seeing more activism from our cultural community in terms of demanding a share of the pie, particularly when you see the benefits of what our artists bring to us as a community.
Since you might not go back to making films for a while,
Yeah.
because the New Democratic Party's been successful and you had a very successful campaign, I'm reminded of crossing paths with you on the campaign trail, but a few elections ago, when you were accompanying the then NDP candidate in St. John's, Peg Norman, your partner. And I remember I was with, my colleague Tristram Clark, who produces the In Conversation show, and I were working for the cable public affairs channel covering campaigns. I remember saying to Trist afterwards, I said, Jerry's the candidate. Like, Peg was sort of shy and was kind of uncomfortable meeting strangers at the door. No, you're hi, how are you? How you doing? What's going on? Well, anyways, you guys finally switched roles.
Well, I was surprised at what happened at the door, on the doorsteps. Sometimes people would open the door and just take me in their arms. I remember one woman, I knocked on the door and the door opened and she looked and she said, "Oh my God, Jerry Rogers," and she started to cry. And I guess because people have, a lot of people have seen my films, and then I did a film about my own breast cancer called My Left Breast, which is not what you would expect a documentary about breast cancer to be. I often say it's not really about breast cancer, it's about love. And it was a very intimate, and it was kind of wacky.
Award-winning, beautifully reviewed.
Oh yeah, yeah.
It's a magnificent piece of filmmaking.
We won over 20 awards. Yeah, way over. But anyways, we were very lucky. So I think that people have a sense that they know me. And the film My Left Breast was really about all of our desire to be loved and to love in return. And to live with some sense of hope and some sense of optimism. And I think I have to be a little bit careful about using those words, hope, love, hope, and optimism, because that's what Jack Layton wrote in the letter he left to the people of Canada before he died. So I don't want it to seem like jargon. But going down that road of talking about love, hope, and optimism, I've found this whole business about being a politician. Those words don't quite fit in my mouth.
Say, it doesn't come off your tongue smoothly and easily.
It doesn't, But I think, people have often asked me, why did I decide to go into politics? Why did I decide to run? And I can remember a crucial moment, a turning moment for me, and it was when the last federal election, and our premier and her whole caucus held a rally for Stephen Harper, and he came to town. They totally supported him, and they were giddy about it. And so I went down to the rally, and I led a demonstration right into the hotel. And I can't help but think that it was such a visceral moment for me that it catapulted me into action, as I think it catapulted a lot of people into action, when I thought, no, this is not who we are. This is not what we want. We don't want that right-wing neoconservatism, that Stephen Harper type of politics that it's exclusive, that it's punitive, that is dismantling what we have worked so hard as a country to build. And particularly, that's not who we are as Newfoundlanders and Labradorians. That's not who we are as a community. And that just catapulted me into action. And really so I decided to help. I've been a member of the NDP. I've worked on a number of elections. So I decided to try and help find candidates for our provincial election. And the next thing you know, well, there I was at 55 on my 55th birthday. I spent my 55th birthday, that's when I started my campaign and went door to door. But I truly believed that, in Newfoundland and Labrador, we're 500,000 people in a time of prosperity. We can get this right. You know, we can get it right. We can be a compassionate society. We can be a society that has a sense of fairness and justice, of social justice, where nobody's left behind. Again, that sounds like a jargon, but I truly believe that. And I went in there with my eyes, I thought, fully open, and I thought, I'm going to be able to work with the government. We're all reasonable people. We all have the same goal and the same hopes for our 500,000 people that are spread all over Newfoundland and Labrador. And it was so easy to dismiss me as being naive. But I think to see someone like Jack Layton, who was a really smart man. He had his PhD in economics and political science and a leader of a major political party, to dare to have the courage in a political arena to talk about love, hope, and optimism, to dare to have the courage to talk about those kinds of things. And I think, yeah, it's possible.
Let me ask you a last question. Does the filmmaker in you have any regrets?
My filmmaking's not over. And you know, the one thing about filmmaking is that it's a collaborative. It's a collaborative effort. You know, I have never made a film on my own. I've made a film with a team. And the work that I'm doing right now as an elected representative of St. John's Centre, I'm not doing this on my own. I feel that I'm working with a team of people. And that team of people are not just the people who might be in our caucus or who are working in the office, but it's the people of St. John's Centre. I truly believe that. And when I feel, oh my God, what the heck have I done? I remember so many of those people that I met on the doorstep and who I continue to meet or who call our office. And then, you know, I have a number of critic areas. So that means it's about, you know, listening to the people of Newfoundland and Labrador. So it's again, it's similar work. And when I stand up in the House, it's about bringing those voices and trying to tell a story and trying to get that message through. And trying, because I always felt that part of filmmaking was giving a voice to people so that they could speak uninterrupted. Well, it's a little bit harder for me to speak uninterrupted in the House, but I'm going to continue to try that. So, but you know, people keep saying, "Are you keeping notes for doing a film?" And yeah. You know, it's not over, and sometimes I think, you know, somebody calls me and I go visit somebody in their house who are going through hell, and we're trying to make the system, you know, respond to the real needs of real people. I'm just thinking, oh, damn it, if we had a camera right now, what a fabulous film this would make. Well,
we'll have to wait. We'll let you get back to it. Thanks for making time in your schedule to chat with us. It was delightful. Thank you.
Thank you, Roger.